All right, let's go ahead and do the Excel 3 homework. So I put that file on the server. Again, like I said, there's only a few steps, but each step takes a lot of thought. So go ahead and open up Excel 3 homework. Okay. Does yours say to enable editing at the top? Yeah. Just okay. So make sure you do that each time. Okay. So you could see if you scroll down, this is it. What you see right here is it's one page. Okay. And there are 5 steps. Okay. What we're going to do is eventually we're going to fill in all these areas that are pink and yellow and gray. We're going to fill those all in. That's the goal. And what it should look like by the end of the day, if you go to the second sheet that says guide, it should look something like this. The colors are way off here. I'm just talking about the numbers that are in there. So when you do it, we know we're doing it right if we come over here and the numbers match. Okay, so that's what that's there for. We'll go back and forth between these 2 tabs. So I wanted to have that. Yes, you could just type those numbers in, but that's not the point. So, all right, so the explanation should actually be step 1. I don't know why. I should have just made that step 1. Anyway, and the rest of them. So that's like one of the steps here. So let me just read that and see what we're going to do. Let me kind of show you what the idea is of this lab. This guy, the first customer here, his name is C. Smith. He buys an Epson printer. He buys 10 of them. Okay, so if you're not focusing on it now, watch this part, because this is where you need to kind of hear this to know what's going on, or you can get lost pretty quick. So this guy, he's buying an Epson printer, and he's buying 10 of them. Well, as you guys know, the more things you buy, the cheaper they get, right? So if we go over to this table on the right, it says Epson printers, Lexmark printers, HP printers. So an an Epson printer, that is $85 if you buy 1 of them. If you buy 10 of them, then they're $80 each. If you buy 50, there's price breaks. Okay. Same thing. Lexmarks, I guess they're more expensive. I think I just made these numbers up. So you get the idea. Like, the more you buy, the cheaper they get. So the idea over here in this column is, if he's buying 10 Epson printers, how much is his total? So how much is the list price, I guess, is what we're trying to fill out. So the list price, so if he's buying 10 of them, they're $80 each, should be $800, right? So we go over to this guide, and you can see the list price, $800. But we don't want to just type in $800. We want Excel, to do the work, because we want to, yes, it'd be a lot easier just to do this by hand for 4 or 5 of these. But if you got 30 of these things to do, or hundreds or thousands, all you got to do is figure it out once and then just, drag it down. That's the goal. So we got to figure out, how can we make a formula that looks up the price based off of how many they buy and which printer they're buying. That's the goal of this first step. Okay. So we're going to definitely use a Vlookup command, because we got to look up something based off of what they're buying. Okay, so that's what we'll start with. So in this first cell F2, type in equals Vlookup. Okay, And we want to figure out what is it that we're looking up. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's not, we're going to probably start the formula and kind of backtrack and work our way around this. So Vlookup. Yeah, so we want to look up, well, first of all, the table that we're going to use to look up stuff is over here on the right. Okay, so that's going to be our table. So I'm going to skip to the second argument of the function. I'm going to just highlight this table. Okay, that actually should be the table array, the second function. Okay, so that we're going to just leave some, at least I have something to start with. Okay, but what am I looking up? I'm trying to look up a quantity code. So this first guy, he buys 10 of them. Let's start with 55, just because that's more interesting. 10, it's too easy to fake the answer. 55 is a little harder because there is no number over in the quantity code that is 55. So what we want to do is let's go to this one. Equals Vlookup. And the table array will be this table over here. Okay. So the lookup value, I'm not sure what it's going to be yet. We're going to figure that out. We want to look up, we don't want to look up 55. We want to look up a number that's 1, 10, 50, 100, or 250. So what we're trying to do is we're going to try to force, if it's 55, we're going to look up 50. If it's 34, we're going to look up 10, right? Because it rounds down. You have to look up at the number that it's, you know, if you only buy 34, you're not going to get a price break at 50. So you're only going to get the 10 unit price break. So that's the idea. We're going to do that part last because that's the hardest part. So we're going to use the table on the right. So that's our table array. And what is our column index going to be? So over here, I want to eventually pick one of these amounts. So let's say he buys 10 of them. I want to look up, you know, and he buys an Epson. I want to look up the $80. So this guy, this second guy right here, he's buying an HP. So the column index number is how many spots over is the HP. Come over here. The HP is basically the fourth column, the fourth. So, comma 4, or not 4. What do we click on? Here's our printer code right here. HP is in column 4. Epson is in column 2. So I made this little extra column right here to make things a little simpler on us. So I don't want to just type in column 4 because what if it's not an HP? What if he's buying an Epson? So it has to be updatable. And so depending on which printer I'm buying, that's going to determine which column I'm using. So if you're like somebody making this table up, maybe this printer code was never there. You would put that in as a way to help. You know, there's other ways to do it, but so instead of putting a 4 in, I'm going to just click on cell B3 for my column index. Okay. Again, I skipped the lookup value, so that's I'm on the I did the table array. I'm doing the column index. Now the last thing will be false because I want to look up. It has to be exactly 4. It can't be 4.5 or whatever. So those 3 arguments aren't too hard to figure out because what table are we looking up values? Which column are we looking up the values in? The thing is, what are we looking up? Okay, so like I said, we have to pick a number over here if we bought 8, then we can only use the quantity 1. So we're basically, if the number is 17, we use 10. If the number is 49, we use 10. If the number is, basically, if it's between 50 and 100, use 50. So that's the idea. So we can use, over here, our lookup value can be an if statement, right? So that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to put a comma in here and put the data before the comma, because that's, well, what are we looking up? We're looking up the quantity, but the quantity isn't just 55 times $100. It depends on how many. So if, parenthesis, if the quantity right here, cell D3, is what? What do I type in? So if it's less than 10, okay. If it's less than 10, then what am I looking up? If it's less than 10, I want to use the quantity 1, right? So that's what I'm going to look up. I'm going to look up 1 here. So if D3 is less than 10, then I'm going to force it to be a 1, basically. I want to look up a 1. Okay? So, comma 1. Otherwise, comma, if, another if statement, if cell D3 is less than what? If it's less than 50, then look up 10. Right? Now here's where it can be confusing. What if I'm looking up the number 8? 8 is less than 10, but it's also less than 50. So isn't that a problem? Fortunately, Excel goes in order from left to right. So if it's less than 10, then it's done. It doesn't even go to the next if statement. So it is okay to like kind of have like these sub trees in a sense, like subcategories. So it's not going to go to the next one if 8 is definitely less than 50, but it's not even going to get there if it already matched another criteria. So it's okay to do this. So if it's less than 50, then make it 10. Otherwise, if D3 is less than what? What's the next one? 100. Else, if D3 is less than 100, make it 50, right? So if you're less than 100, if you're between 50 and 100, your price break is at 50. So if you're less than 100, if you're otherwise, comma, if D3 is less than 250, make it 100, comma 100. Else what? So if it's not less than 10, if it's not less than 50, if it's not less than 100, if it's not less than 250, then we only have one thing left, right? It's 250 or more. So we don't have to have another if statement. You can just say comma. Otherwise, make it 250, and then close parenthesis, and another close parenthesis. You have all of these parentheses. So I'll zoom in on the equation so you can see it. And then you press enter and you just pray, please have the right number of commas, and I don't. You've entered too many things. Let's see. I'm sorry? I don't know. Let's see. Purple. Luckily, they're color coded, so you can see. Am I missing? Purple, green. I need 4 parentheses. There you go. Yeah. There we go. Wait, and then, yeah. So it's color coded, so you can tell you have to, for every open parenthesis, you have to have a closed parenthesis. That was it. So there's my fun, lovely equation. So if you press enter and it gives you, it screws up, just go back into it, see if you can make it look. I'll zoom in here. It should be like this. I'll give you a minute to make sure it's working. Hopefully that worked for you. If not, we're going to keep going. Now, I need to drag this down, right? But it's not going to work. It's not going to work because of the dollar. If you ever drag something down and it screws up, you should think dollar signs. The dollar... We need to include dollar signs with this lookup table, right? Because notice when you drag it down, it updates every single row. Some of them you want to update. Some of them you don't. So let me go back into this first. So D3, if it's less than 10, the D3s, do we want to let it update? Yeah, because then we want to look at D4. Okay, so the only thing that's a problem is, I guess, the table, J6 through M11. We want to fix it, J $6, M $11. That way it always stays on that table. You can put dollar signs in front of the J and in front of the M as well, but it's not going to matter because the J's and the M's, when you drag down a list, it doesn't update columns. It only updates rows because you're still within the same column. So you don't really need those, but if you put them in, it's not going to hurt. And then B3, is that, yeah, we want that updatable too. So we'll leave that. So basically go into the formula, put a dollar sign for the table that we're looking up information in. So you can drag it up. Oops. You can drag it up. You can drag it down. And there's a problem.
How far are we dragging it down?
Just drag it down to cell 20 or row 20. Info data. Now what's wrong with this? No, if you have an error, that's what I'll do is I'll save this to the that drive right now. So if you didn't get this to work, just look up at the drive.
No, I just have value at -20. I think I get it right.
Oh, okay. Well, let me save this anyway. I'll press save every couple minutes in case you get lost. So I'll call it updated. Okay, but $80, that's not right. It's not supposed to be $80. It's supposed to be what? Well, let's go look. It's supposed to be $800 for the first one. So why is it saying 80? What do I need to do to fix this? I got to multiply. Yeah, that's the price for one of them. I got to multiply it by how many I actually bought. So all of this Vlookup gives us the dollar price for one unit. I got to multiply it all. I got to multiply it all by cell D2. Okay. That's probably like the hardest step in this homework. Using a VLOOKUP table with conditional arguments. Okay, let's look at one of them to make sure this makes sense. This guy bought 275 HP computers. Okay, so I don't know which one that is. I'm looking at row 9 here. This guy bought 275 HP computers. So that means HP, he's paying $300 each. So $300 times 275 better be 82,500. Okay, it works. Sam says it's good. Yeah, so that, I mean, you could check your work that way. That's what you always want to do. These formulas, you want to make sure they look right for a few of them. Alrighty. So that was the explanation. Let's go to step 1. So step 1 says we want to fill. Okay, no, that is step 1 we just did. Sorry. That's step 2, yeah. In the special price, you are to give them a 10% discount if the customer ordered within the last 30 days. Okay, we're going to use the days 360 function and the today function, and we're going to do it all within one formula. Okay. So the special price, they get a 10% discount if the order date is within the last 30 days of today's date. So today is October 20th, 2015. So this guy should get 10% off. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to say equals. What are we going to say equals to? Equals what? Okay, so equals what? Today? So the today function. Let's see what that shows. Okay, there we go. So there's a today function. That's today, today's date. So how can we use that? We're gonna have to put that as part of our function. Yeah. Now what do I do? What do I add? Well, I want to put all this into one cell now, one formula. So make this. Now what? I want the price of this to eventually be $720, right? Because that's 10% off. So what do I do now? If today is less than what? 30 days. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's just see, you know, at least we're brainstorming, and then you pretty much will eventually get something close, and you might have to rearrange. So if today is less than 30,
No, that's that. 360.
okay, if today is less than days 360, open parenthesis. Remember, the days 360 command gives you the difference between two dates. So any other ideas? Now what do I do? We're doing the right stuff. It's just kind of in a weird order here. Okay, today. Okay, so days 360. We want to look at the difference between today and the date. So today's date and the date they ordered. So let's get rid of this today less than days 3. Let's get rid of this part right here. So our formula so far should say days 360. We're trying to find the number of days between today's date and the date they ordered. Okay, so E2. Now, if you close a parenthesis, as you're building your formulas up, test them. Don't do the entire formula like we did a second ago and then press enter. You really want to do them step by step, see if they're working, if it's possible. And notice it didn't work. Why doesn't it work? Yeah, you start with the earlier date, and then so we should switch this. It should be, what's the difference between E2 and today's date? Right? The start date comes first. the start date. So the earlier date is the first one you put. All right. Now I pressed enter. Does your guys say January 15th, 1900? Okay, yours may or may not. Why do you think mine's saying this? It should tell me how many days there are between these. It should be a number, right? Why is it saying this then? Yeah, when a second ago when I said the cell was equal to today's date, it automatically formatted it as a date. Now that I turned it into a number, it's still formatted as, right up here, is still formatted as a date. So I got to change that to just a number. Okay? So it turns out the number 15 is equal to, remember, the dates start January 1st, 1900. So 15 is equal to that, January 15th. So my format got messed up. So we did everything right, and so you might think like, uh-oh, there's a problem, when really it's not a big problem at all. Okay, but this is not right. We're not done yet. So there has been 15 days. So this guy should get a discount, shouldn't he? Because it hasn't been 30 days yet. So what do I do to this formula? Which function do I use? If. Yeah, so I go in there and if, open parenthesis, if this number that we just came up with is what? Less than 30. You can say greater than 30 too. You're just going to change your logic around. But let's just say less than 30. If it's less than 30, then, comma, if today's, I'm screwing this up. I put the 30 on the wrong side. If this thing is less than 30, so where you put your parentheses and commas and stuff, you know, you got to be very careful, because if they're even one spot over, it's not going to work. So if this days 360 thing, all right here, if all of this, that's going to return the number 15. If that's less than 30, then if that's true, the true statement comes first. If it's true, then what do I want to do? And so what do I type? I want this cell to equal we want to subtract 10% from the list price. A slightly easier way is we just take cell F2, and instead of subtracting 10%, we just multiply F2 by 0.9. Yeah, it's 90%. You can subtract 10%. It's just a little bit more, you know, there's a couple other, you know, we have to subtract 0.1 times F2. Okay, so if it's less than 30, the cell should be the list price times 90%. So they got 10% off that way. Otherwise, what? F2. And that's it. Drag it down. Now notice these are not in dollars. It didn't format it as dollars, so you can just probably put a dollar sign in there and just click on that little dollar. It'll format it as dollars. I don't like that it, well, I guess we do have to show 50 cents in here, huh? Because that's annoying. I'll give them a discount. We'll round it. All right, that was step 2. So we're making progress here. Any questions on... I'll save this now, in case you got lost here. I think that was the second hardest step. Okay, step 3. Fill in the average, maximum, minimum, sum, standard for the 3 columns. blah, 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 blah. So what I'm doing here is I want to find the average quantity. I want to find the maximum quantity. I want to find the minimum quantity. So basically for these green, these blank green, pink, and yellow cells, we're just going to do what it says for each column. So the first one would be the average would be equals average. Okay, let me zoom in for Scion back there. Okay, so equals average. We're just going to average all of these. So this is not a complicated step. We're just doing some, it's more like busy work, I guess, because it's just one function. So you should get 53 because that's the average number of printers people bought. 50. Wow. So I go back to my guide. Yeah, my guide says the number should have been 53 right there, so I'm doing things right. So go ahead and spend a couple minutes doing this. The maximum, the sum, the standard deviation. Okay, and you can just, if you're not sure how to do this, do it for all three columns. If you're not sure how to do this, just kind of watch me. I'll keep talking. Maximum. The maximum of all the printers, quantities. Turns out there's 275, you know, you can see that's the biggest number just by looking. But again, we do this because there might be thousands of entries, and that's hard to look up manually. Minimum. So the least anybody ordered was 1. The sum, how many did we get all together? So you should be getting 1,001 printers were ordered. Standard deviation. There's a lot of standard deviations. When you type it in STDEV, there's all sorts of options. I usually pick the one without a dot next to it. Just standard deviation. Highlight them all. You wouldn't believe how much math is involved in calculating the standard deviation. So we're not, it does it all for us. It's like a calculator. Right, so do that for all the columns. Actually, I'm just going to drag these over, right? You can just do it for one column and then just drag them over and you're done. I'm going to check my guide, see if I'm doing things right. Yep. Yeah, so if you did it for the first column, you can just highlight all 5 of those and then drag it over, and it's going to do the same thing for all the columns. So I'll save that in case. So the next thing is going to be interesting. We haven't done this one yet. It's kind of cool. We have this thing called average if. So we're basically moving on to step 4 here. All right. So wouldn't it be nice to know what is the average price if they're buying an Epson? What is the average price if they're buying an HP? Right now we have like averages for everything. But sometimes you want to average it only if it's an Epson, right? We want to only consider it as part of the average if the quantity is more than 100. Or only average it if blah, blah, blah. Like, that's what we're, like, maybe we say, how many how many printers, what's the average number of printers people buy if they buy an Epson? That's the idea. So we don't want to just average the quantity, because right now the average number of printers is 53. They're buying 53. But what's the average number of Epsons they're buying versus average number of HP? Because that will tell you like which one's the one that's selling the most. So that's what we're gonna do now. So we're gonna use in this cell, go to cell F26, and we want to average. We want to find the average of the list price, basically. You know, how much money are people spending if they're buying an Epson? That's the idea. So you go to Epson, and what we're going to type in here is equals, and there's a function called average if. We only want to average it if it meets a certain criteria. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is inside, for the argument, inside the parenthesis, average it if. So we're going to select on, there's two parts to this function. What do we want to average, and what is the criteria for what we're choosing to average? Okay, so the first thing we're going to pick on is what is the criteria for what we're choosing to average? Okay, so we're going to highlight for the first argument cells B2 through B20. So, okay, so basically the idea is if you're looking through cells B2 through B20, if it's an Epson is a 2. Okay, so we're going to put a comma 2 here. So the idea is we're going to look through all this data right here. And if it's a 2, we're going to add it to the list of things to average. Okay, so because we're dealing with Epsons right now. Okay, so if it's a 2, now what do we want to average? Well, we press comma. We want to average the list price. So we highlight all of the list. And the beauty of this is you don't have to pick and choose which one is an Epson and which one is not. The function does that for you. It tells you okay, so this is what we should have. We're looking at cells B2 through B20. If there's a 2 in there, then average, then look at cells F2 through F20 and only put it in to the formula if that's the case. So 23, let me see if I got that right. Yep. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing now. So for the Lexmark, we're just got to, all we got to do is drag the formula down, but not quite, right? We got to figure out what can we do. We don't want to do the same exact thing. So for the Lexmark, we don't want to average B3 through B21. We want to still keep the same table. So let me delete that. So instead of B2 through B20, I'm going to do $2 through $20. Instead of F2 through F20, I want to do $2 through $20, because that way it's stuck on those cells. And so I press enter. So we're not changing the formula, it's just we're changing it so when we drag it down, it knows what to update and what not to update. Okay. And so we're still not good because it's still picking the Epsons for each one of these. So what do we got to change? Yeah, what is our criteria? It's for the Lexmark, Lexmarks are 3s. So in this cell right here, we're changing it to a 3. And in this cell, we're changing it to a 4. All right. Right? So that's an average if function. It's kind of neat. It's basically like we could have made this function ourselves. We could have said, we could have put an if statement. If the cell over here is a 2, then average, and it would just be a really ugly thing, but this is a nice compact way of doing the same thing. So we're still in step 4, except for these three blank spots right here. We're gonna do the same thing, except we want it to average the special price. Okay, so the special price, same exact thing, except we could pretty much take these 3 rows and move them over, right? Drag them over, but we got some issues we got to deal with if we do that. So I'm going to drag them over and then just fix the issues. Turns out if I drag it over to the right, all of a sudden now it updates, instead of column B2 through B20, it's doing C2, because when you drag things to the right, it updates the columns automatically. So guess what? We got to go back over here and fix our original. We got to put a $sign in front of the B as well, don't we? So $sign in front of the B, $sign in front of the B. Do we want to put a $sign in front of the F? Actually, no, we don't, because when we drag it to the right, we want it to automatically go to the G column. Right? So the F column, F2 through F20, when we drag it to the right, we want it to go to G. So we're actually going to leave the $signs not in front of the F. Or we're not going to put $signs in front of the F. So we got to re-drag down, and then, oh, screwed that up. Change this to a 3. Change this to a 4. Okay, and now I can finally take this and drag it to the right. And you can see, wow, you can see who's getting the biggest discount. Okay, well, who is? Well, let's find out. Let's do the price difference right here. Let's subtract these 2 numbers. Which one of these is getting the biggest price difference? Well, it's going to equal the first one minus the second one. All right, so who's getting the biggest price break? Well, if you're buying an Epson, the average is, not the average, but the total, they're getting $136 off because they're buying so many. Well, that doesn't seem like much, but when you compare it to how many dollars worth they're buying, we can come over here to the right. Why don't we do this? To the right of this, we're going to, 136, type in equals, click on the 136, and divide it by the 2363. And that's going to give us a percentage. And I got to convert, after I do that, after I divide cell H 26 divided by cell F 26, after I do that, I got to highlight it and click on the percentage to convert it into a percent. So it turns out, yeah, the Lex, even though the HP is $617, you know, the Epson is actually, when they buy an Epson, they're actually buying a lot of Epsons. That's the idea, right? Because they're getting 6% more of a price break, meaning they're buying more. So kind of, this is the kind of thing that businesses make their decisions based off of. Not only how much are we selling, but that's not the important thing. It's how much quantity is each individual person buying, and and what's the average number that each person is buying, and based off of that, the most important thing may not be how much each person's buying. The most important thing may not be the total price they're selling everything for. There might be other things there, and that's the kind of stuff you can do in Excel. So another thing that's kind of interesting, back at this right here, I typed in average if, and I said I want to average all the Epsons, so I picked a number 2. And then I had to update the 2 and I had to make it a 3. And then I had to manually go in and make it a 4, which was what's another way I could have done that? Instead of making it a 2, I could have changed that to automatically go to a 3 or to a 4. So I'd have to look at these words right here. It says Epson. So I'm not going to do this. It'll take too much work. But I can do the right 5 letters. And if the right 5 letters, so I'll say, like, for instance, instead of putting a 2, I'll say if the right 5 letters of this are equal to quotation mark Epson, then make it a 2. Otherwise, if the right 7 digits are Lexmark, make it a 3. Otherwise, make it HP. So you can do that. It's definitely the way to go if you got lots of, if you're going to do this more than once. Now there is a colon in here. So how do we get rid of the colon? There's a function called mid. And you pick the middle 7 characters starting at the 5th character, and yeah, it's all there. So, it's very using your imagination, creativity. There's not really a wrong way to do things. There's just easier ways, more efficient ways. We're done. Yay. All right. Instead of me grading all these things that you just did, if you're here, you get credit. Because all you have to do is copy the file that I saved. Let me take roll one more time. See who's here. I would upload it just for yourself so you can study. But you don't need it to turn in. I'm not going to look at it since we did it together. So this was Excel 3 homework. So sales here. Chris H. Chris L. Move seats. Damien, David's here, Yun, Hui, Japheth, Jesus, Juan's here, Kong, Ko, Wayne, O'Neill, Sion, Sam, Sewell, Steve. So the only person I don't have is O'Neill and Damien, right? Okay, let me put in the lab. Okay, the lab is the homework. I have a video. The video is right, if you want to take it with you. I put the video under videos, lab videos. Okay, so lab 3 video. Let me hand out, it's actually a piece of paper I got to give you guys. So let me hand that out. And let me put in the lab